in the science of Vastu. So we welcome you, Shashikala.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you for it. Yeah.
So we will start with the first question that many of us may have. What is Vastushastra and why is it considered as a science?
I'll just start with a short prayer if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
Om Sarva Mangala Mangalye Shive Sarvartha Sadhike Sharanye Trambake Gauri Narayani Namostute. Om. So you want to know the history of Vastu or just the meaning of the word?
Both, please.
Yeah. Okay. History of Vastu is that till about 150 years ago, almost everything in our built environment was created by the experts of the Vastushastra until the British educational system took over and our university educated architects came out into the urban environment. So everything, the village, the town, the temple, the monuments, everything was created out of the textual data of the Vastushastra and the practice in the field by the practitioners. And the practitioners are called Vishwakarma. In various parts of the country, they have different names. In Tamil Nadu, they are called Kamala. In Kerala, they are called the Tacha, Peruntacha. And the Panchala are also Vishwakarma. So 150 years ago, they were making stone, wood, mud, which means brick, stabilized brick or burnt brick, then metal and jewelry. They were the five, that's why they called the Panchala, the five communities which looked after everything in our built environment. So what did they use? They used the reference of the texts. So they are called the Vastu Shilpa Shastra. Okay. And this comes from a very ancient time. You have mention of it in the Buddhist Brahmanas. You have mention of it in the Surya Siddhanta. And the origin, as of everything else in the Hindu system, is from the Vedas. So this comes from the Vedas right in the early stages and then gets adapted into what are known as the Shastra, which can be loosely translated into technical treatise today. Okay. So the technical treatise, Vastu Shilpa Shastra, has several components. It speaks about the built environment. It speaks about sculpture. It speaks about town and country planning. And then it also has information on Yana and Shayana, which means the vehicles as well as the furniture. So these are the broad classifications of the Vastu Shilpa Shastra. So the next thing is, what does Vastu mean? Today, loosely, it is being called as architecture. Let's go to the etymological meanings. Vastu comes from two basic words, Vas and Vastu. Vas means to reside in, to stay in, to live in, to be on. Okay. And Vastu means the object or thing, stuff. Loosely, if you translate it. But in the Vastu Shilpa Shastra, Vastu becomes translated into Shilpa, which means crafted item. It is not just a thing which is all around us, but something that is deliberately crafted in a particular manner. So how does it relate to each other? Vastu becomes Vastu, which becomes the space. Okay, so every object is placed in a space. There's a two-dimensional space and there's a three-dimensional space. So the concept of Vastu and Vastu literally is nesting. You nest something into a space. So endlessly you can nest. So I am a Vastu. I'm sitting on this chair. The chair is my Vastu. The chair is a Vastu. It's placed on the floor. The floor is the Vastu. All of us together are placed in this room. The room is the Vastu. This entire house is placed on the ground. So Bhumi becomes the Vastu. And so on. You keep nesting endlessly. And what does that mean? It means that the Vastu and the Vastu are endlessly in relationship. The space and the object. So you can loosely say it is architecture and sculpture, architecture and interior.
I see.
So everything, when it's in relationship, both the built form, the space it occupies, and the forms within it, it is known as Vastu Shilpa Shastra.
I see. And Shashikalaji, how ancient is this science? To whom can we credit the origins? You mentioned 5 different
communities.
Types of people, right? And where are they now? Are they active? So there are 3 questions in one packed for you.
Yeah, the origin is as always from the Vedas. So these are actually part of the Gandharva Veda, from which Sangeeta and Natya also comes. So all the aesthetic arts come from the Vedas, and then they become Upavedas. They become subsequent texts, and then you find their reference in various other texts also. There's a whole chapter in, for example, the Surya Siddhanta. But it will not be the entire text. I have a lot of clients who come and say, oh, this is what it says. No, don't get caught with that. That's just a reference. You have to go to the original text to understand the larger picture. So it comes from probably the time of the Vedas. That is one. And then you have to understand textual data for the technical texts. What are the Shastras? Will not be only from the textual data. Like my teacher always told me, poetry was written first and then only grammar. It's like that. You can't write grammar and then write poetry with using the grammar text. It is not possible. Poetry is a natural outburst. Grammar is structuring it. Okay. So the structure cannot come first. Similarly, the built environment happened organically. It happened naturally for human collectives. As they moved from caves to forests to villages and into cities. So this movement created a certain knowledge of the environment, and that got codified in the Shastras. Okay, so you have, originally I believe there were 64 Vastu Shilpa Shastra in Samskrita. I'm talking about Sanskritam. And then scores of texts in the other Indian languages. So the Samskrita texts, which are the original, from which all the other languages have actually translated, they were 64, out of which 32 were lost over time. Because as you know, almost all the texts were learnt by heart and memorized and passed on through the oral transference. They were not written as a text except in the manuscript form. So there were 32 left, out of which my teacher Ganapati Stapati had 16 and I have 8. So these texts are more or less similar with local variations, like the text from Kerala will be different from the text from Tamil Nadu. Variations because of climate and the geography.
I see.
So you have a long, and each of these communities of the 5 Panchala, Manu, Maya, Twashta, Shilpi, and Vishwagnya. These were the names of the 5 communities. They are very much in existence. They are still practicing in their own small ways, very marginalized because of the takeover by the university educated people. Doing their job, they are referring their own texts, and usually the texts are kept in each family in the form of palm leaf manuscripts. I have seen the ones in Ganapati Stapati's house. So they still refer to them. They're all well versed in Samskrita, and the local language. They're looking after it. They're custodians, basically.
I see. Wonderful. The next question is the intersection of space, us, the environment, and how is this connected to in relation to the Vastu, Yoga, and Ayurveda when it comes to living in harmony? I know that's a complicated question, but I know you will decipher it.
I will start by telling you what is the nature of the relationship in Vastushastra first.
Yes.
So in Vastushastra, as I already said, there is form and there is space and there is object. So the enclosure form, there is a space within it, and then there is an object. Let me take the example of a classical temple. Okay, the classical temple actually represents the Brahman's form. The formless is being given a form. So how is that done? You're using two parameters. One is the Sthula Sharira, and the other is the Sukshma Sharira, the subtle body and the physical, gross body. So the gross body is the Vimana, which is built around, above the Garbhagriha, okay, within which is placed the divine image, whatever it may be, Shiva, Vishnu, Shakti, whichever image it is. There is a structure that is built around it, which represents the Meru, the original sacred mountain, always. So this form is the Sthula Sharira of the Divine One. Then within that is the form of the divine, the Murti, which is also a Sthula Sharira. Between the two of them, there is space, which is the Sukshma Sharira. So it is the space, and within the space are particles of energy. So it is the energy that becomes the spatial component, right? So the connection between the object, which is the Vastu in the Murti, and the Vaastu of the built form is between the space in between, which is the energetic form. So within us also, there is the physical body, which is actually correlated to the temple structure. In Tamil, we say Ullam Perunkoil, which means the body is the big temple, within which are the elements, the bodily elements, as well as the five senses and the indriyas, that which perceives, that which hears, that which tastes, and so on. All of them are energetically connected. And what is the energy in the physical body? It is prana, as it's known in yoga. So the component of energetic space becomes prana in the yoga system. And the same prana, when you take it into Ayurveda, it's talking about balancing all these elements so that you are in alignment. And the alignment in the sacred temple is the central axis, which is the Sushumna Nadi, or the Brahma Sutram, as it's known in the temple. So they're all allied in very simple ways to bring about a certain alignment in the individual, in the built space, in the community, in the settlement.
I see. What is the Brahma Sutra? And so, if I understand correctly, are temples essentially places where people go to charge themselves?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So there's a beautiful allegory, a beautiful symbolism of the sacred walk in the temple, the parikrama, which I'll just speak about. Maybe that will be more meaningful than trying to give you a definition. The whole idea of the temple prakara is that there is a gopuram. Gopuram is the entryway, and the entryway designates the feet of the Lord. It is the lying down Purusha. The cosmic Purusha is lying down. The feet are the gopura. So it's like this, the feet are turned upward. So you walk through the feet into the body of the Purusha. The standing Vimana is also the body of the Purusha. His feet are the foundation. His legs are the mandapa. His upper body is the superstructure. And then this becomes the shikara. This is the griva, or the neck of the structure. Okay, just below the shikara, there is a small portion which is known as the griva. So you are actually experiencing the sacred body of Mahapurusha, who has been brought onto the earth. So you walk through the entrance gopuram, and there is a Dvajastambham there, which signifies the 7 chakras. Dvajastambham is the sacred flag, which is at the entrance, and this signifies the chakras. So when you enter, you touch the feet of the chakras, the feet of the Dvajastambam and say, may my Mooladhara get opened out to your divine energy. And then you walk around the prakara, watching all the beautiful images of nature and of society. Every one of them is a representation of the beauty of the world around you. So you stay within the world around you. You allow all your senses to get opened out. You smell the sugandha coming from the garbhagriha. You hear the sacred words. Your feet are on the rough stone, so they're getting energized. Every part of you is getting energized. You might also be chanting, so your tongue and your mouth and your saliva is getting energized. And saliva is very important. It's known as Vani. It is the source of your vak, your ability to communicate with the world. So this whole thing is getting energized. You come around and then you come to the Garbhagriha, and then you watch the divine form in the flickering lamplight, not in the tube light of the new temples, but in the old temples where they still have an oil lamp, okay? In that flickering lamplight, you watch the image, and while you're listening to the chant, you go inward, you close your eyes and allow this energy to take you into a higher state, to align you. And when you feel aligned, you're so joyous, you do a parikrama, pradakshina around yourself. It is known as Atma Pradakshina, because you're saying, you out there are here within me. And then you come out of the temple, and then you look at the Dvajastambam, take a look at the topmost, which is the flag, and say, this Sahasrara, may it be opened for me, and thank you for having offered this to me. And then you do your namaskaram, and you leave the temple. This is called the sacred walk. Few people know it, they still do it. Most people go there for their vyavaharika, for their marketplace relationship of society, which also the temple offered. It is not lower or higher. It is another way. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I see. We have a related question that has come from one of the people who is present here today. So we can do the chanting and use of the voice when we are participating in a walk within the temple.
Absolutely.
But when the temple is being built, what kind of shlokas or I don't want to use the word ritual, but I will, goes into the building of the temple by the sculptors and the carpenters? If you can tell us a bit about that too, please.
The tradition is that the Yajamana is a very important part of the sacred precinct. It's called Devalaya. So the Devalaya is built in relationship with the Yajamana. The local people, they were also a very important part. So it will be the community, the Yajamana, and the builder community. And usually it starts with, just like we have today, of sending out the nature of the building and asking for responses from various people, choosing the right one. And that also is very critical. Today, what do we do when we take the quotations of various people? We choose the cheapest. In traditional systems, they never chose the cheapest. They chose the one which was of the highest quality. Even it became the most expensive. They checked out the person and saw the quality of the work. Like, for example, Gangekonda Chorapuram or Brihadishwara temple in Tanjavur couldn't have been built by the cheapest group. It had to be built by the best. So then, after the person had been nominated, the community had been nominated, they prepared the first set of drawings. Invariably, they only prepared plan and elevation. They did not have three-dimensional models at all in the tradition. And the plan and the elevation was done on a parchment, sometimes on the face of the wall. I have still seen some in old monuments, you can still see the lines that were drawn before the building was created. Like in the cave temples, you can see it on the wall, where they have actually marked with red earth, the plan and the elevation of the structure. So after this, they got the entire team works, and that also today my husband is using this for management a lot after having talked to my teacher a lot about it. The community works as a team, and it is not like Charlie Chaplin's modern times where you're endlessly screwing something on. No, every one of them knew the larger picture. And that, I think, is a phenomenal management technique. So people took roles in the assigned roles in the built form based on their age and their experience. So they moved to the highest level of the supervising Sapati after they had maybe 15, 20 years of experience. No other reason, but that person was trained on everything. So it was like a putting together a sort of what is that called, where you place everything together, like a
jigsaw puzzle that comes together.
No, more than that. That three-dimensional thing children play with. I suddenly don't remember.
Legos.
Legos. It's something like a Lego. It's a spatial module. It's not a two-dimensional thing. So spatial modules are put together by people who are trained on every aspect of it and knows the whole picture. So when they're doing something, they are looking at perfection. And that is something which is remarkable. Otherwise, they couldn't have pulled off a Ellora or a Brihadishwara. It is not possible. Okay. So this ability to bring the best into the smallest task that you're doing is part of this community's capabilities.
I see. Shashikala ji, next question is there overlap between what astrologers these days are saying Vastu and what you have studied according to the original texts?
My feeling today is that people have compartmentalized knowledge, which is just exactly the opposite of what I just told you right now, where everybody holds the whole picture. Unfortunately, people have taken one aspect of it because that's their area of interest, and they have not looked at the larger picture. There is an element of astrology in Vastushastra, but the astrologers have taken it off into saying it is only astrology. Unfortunately, there are some things that they are doing or saying which is quite interesting, but when they don't understand the built form, the material, the space, the local cosmology, the climate, they have no idea. You see, they don't use the geography. They have created a formula-based Vastu, which is completely inappropriate. The texts say that, if you're an intelligent Stapati, you will take these principles and you will apply it to your context. So you had to understand the land, you had to understand the local topography, you had to understand the energy patterns. These people have absolutely no idea about it. So they take this formula Vastu, which is being done in probably Tirupati or somewhere, and put it into South Australia, where the climate is different, the light is different, everything is different. So it is completely, I would say, wrong to do this. But some of the data that they understand of how to create an entrance based on your astrological chart and all that is mentioned in the texts. It is there.
I see.
But it's been taken out in isolation. You can't do that. You have to look at the interconnected nature of the reality.
So speaking of interconnectedness and harmony of space, wherever the nesting and the nested is, what do you say to us as human beings organizing ourselves better in whatever kind of space we are? So can you give us some tips, please? Because this is the application part before we open up to question and answers. Thank you.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I have a feeling here is where yoga plays a very important role. The elements of yoga which teach you to locate yourself in a space and time frame in the here and now and be conscious of everything around you. So supposing, for example, in the last 6 months, I've just been using this corner as my own for everything that I'm doing. My writing, my reading, my talking, my computer, everything is happening here. So in what way can this corner become special for me? And what is the relationship of this Vastu and Vastu to the entire space? So this mutual relationship, this alignment and coordination has to be thought about with a tremendous amount of inner response. This is not an intellectual thing. How do I feel with this color? How do I respond to this form? So special forms that will give me a feeling of harmony, wellness, when I endlessly sit and, go on with the computer keyboard, which is a boring task. When I look up from it, what is it that will enhance me? What is it that will inspire me? So all this is very much part of Vastushastra. In fact, that's what we are doing now. We are trying to teach through Ratambara, you and your space. How can you celebrate your space and be inspired by it? And what is the relationship between your inner space, your body, and your physical space? It can be done and it must be done.
Mm-hmm. I see. Thank you. And we will open it up to questions. And I see some questions have trickled in. And for those who have joined us, thank you for being here. This is being brought to you on behalf of the IndicForum. My name is Anjali Kanojia, and I'm in conversation with Shashikala Ananth. So we are ready to take questions. If you can put them in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask, either is fine. Shashikala ji, one question that has come up is plumbing and drainage. How was this addressed in the ancient texts? And how did the 5 communities work together when buildings were constructed? This is a question that has come up.
Plumbing and drainage is a very ancient form. Those of you who come from Tamil Nadu probably remember the grand Anicut of Chola dynasty and the Vijayanagara period also. Underground plumbing was very much available. In fact, the oldest drainage system is from Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. And they had underground drainage, they had washrooms, they had toilets also. And there were also the public baths. So automatically it means that sewage water has to be separated, rainwater has to be taken for your replenishment of water sources and so on. So very, very smartly they have used the ground levels, the topography of a land. Tamil Nadu had 10,000 eri. Eri is a lake because it was always a dry state. So Tamil Nadu, which much of Andhra and much of Kerala, all that is part of Tamil Nadu, the original Tamil Nadu. So the Chola dynasty had created the most amazing underground system. And you can find this in Rajasthan also, in the step wells. So the idea of tapping underground water and separating effluent was very much part of the system. But if you look at the residential buildings, toilets which carried out effluent were invariably outside of the house. They were seldom inside the main vastu of the building. But the bathroom was allowed, because the bathroom, particularly in the old very orthodox families, women always had a bath before they came into the kitchen. So usually it was located, the bathroom was located next to the kitchen, where you had a bath, and that water was taken out very carefully so that it doesn't mix with the well water and so on. So locating of facilities, particularly the effluent water and the clean water, was very well planned. In fact, the texts say where there is a well, in the diagonally opposite direction must be your effluent, which is such a simple solution. It works today also.
Okay, so the texts outline where good water ought to flow and where technically toilets should not be.
Yeah.
Okay. So Shashikalaji, what do we do, especially in North America? I won't speak for India because there's still some freedom in constructing homes. What do we do when we do have a bathroom, a guest bathroom in the middle of the house? What exactly? What do you suggest?
This is a very common problem. Every time I went to the US, there would be people who would come to me with their drawing, particularly in the suburbs. This is very common. That is because of the building style there, you see. The building style is the building group comes in with all prefabricated panels. Everything is prefabricated and erected. So before they do it, they create a concrete base, and in the middle of it, they bring the water, and next to it, they take out the effluent. It's part of the city rules. So then automatically your toilets are in the middle shaft. It is a problem because traditionally it said effluent when it is inside the Brahmasthana. See, the built form has, supposing this is my square, then the center is known as the Brahmasthana and the Brahmapada. Brahmasthana is the point in the center. Brahmapada is the space around it. So this is considered to be sacred, very special. So whether it's an independent building, individual building, or it's a settlement, the center is supposed to be a place where you actually rejuvenate yourself. So which means the energy of the cosmic being and the energy of the earth being ought to be constantly in relationship. So no building was actually suggested in the center. No hard structure in the center of a settlement and in the home also, which is why the central courtyard, where the Akasha and Prithvi are constantly energizing each other, right? But unfortunately, if you place something like this, of course, there are simple ways in which I try to help them. One is that texts have also said it, and it's also part of our practice. It is called yantra, mantra, and tantra, where by placing a sacred object, creating a prayer process, which is the tantra, and also uchadana, saying your mantra loudly, which means there is a sound energy that's created, a physical objects that is placed, and a mental process that is created. The three of them, when they come together, it is possible to change the energies of a space.
Yantra, mantra.
Yantra, mantra, and tantra. So frequently I teach my clients who have these kind of problems to change the nature of the space by using this process for one mandala. One mandala, variations on that, 42 to 49 days, various ways in which this has been explained. So for a month and a half, to be on the safe side, a month and a half, I ask people to chant, locating this, need not be in the puja room, but a sort of a temporary altar, puja, that is created somewhere near the center of the home. So if you have a toilet in the center, it will be adjacent to it, not within it, but outside of it, more towards the northeast. Place this altar and same time of the day, using the same mantras and the same person. It can be one person has to be constant. For one mandala, if you keep chanting with tremendous inner intent and asking Mother Nature to assist you in changing the nature of the space, there have been remarkable results. It is possible to shift the energy. That is at a very simple level. The second one is to create guardians. And guardians are very well known. Mostly it is Devi or Ganesha. They are the ones who remove the obstacle, placing an image of that on the outside of this structure, which is in the middle. That also towards the northeast, facing towards the east, place a image, a picture, whatever, while you're doing this Yantra Badra Tantra. This guardian is supposed to help in changing the nature of the energy and healing the space. The third, if it is possible, you have an independent house and there is space all around you, you shift the center by creating an extension on one side. That's a very clever thing to do. I have done this in many places and it has worked. So towards the east or the west or the north or the south, if you shift the limits of your Vastu, automatically your center will move out of this location. It can be on any one direction or it can be on two directions, east and north. Automatically, it will move outside of this diametrically, right?
And why the north and the east?
Yeah, it can be, that's what I'm saying, it can be any one of the directions. Two adjacent sides, if you increase, then automatically the center will move out.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And you increase it by creating some kind of space holders, limits. They are also guardians. They can be pillars, they can be flower pots, but they should not be moved. They should be fixed. Or it can be a green hedge, can be a platform, whatever. Varieties of ways based on how much the family can do, cannot do based on the local rules. Yeah, they can actually be patios. You're extending the patios and creating limits.
So
Then
even
automatically,
sorry.
Automatically the center will move.
So the guardians should be placed northeast.
It can be on the points where you have extended.
Okay, so
See,
any point
suppose
that's
you have extended the north and the east, the guardian will be northwest, northeast, and southeast. If it's extended north and west, it will be northeast, northwest, and southwest. You place a pillar, but it has to be done with tremendous mindfulness. Usually the Navaratna Sthapana is done at the base on a good day, and then you chant, you call the energies. See, you have to befriend the energies. That's the whole idea of the ritual. You're befriending, you're making them your friends, you're calling them, you're offering. Basically, it is creating an energetic balance in the space. Okay? All tribal societies continue to do this. This comes from tribal systems, actually.
Okay. One of the other questions has come up is the difference between temple construction in the north and the southern regions of India. Would you tell us a bit about that, please?
The structural changes are there, but the essential principles that I talked about remains the same. That the feet of the Lord and the heart, the mandapa becomes the body, and the head is the vimana. Structurally, the vimana in South India will become like this, you know. There are these repetitive units which go all the way up. There it is just a straight up with small projections. So the structural differences, they are given different names, you know, Vesara, Nagara, and Dravida. But that is a local practice. It has its own aesthetic sensibilities. It comes from other aesthetics also. The dance forms are different. The music is different. The clothes are different. Lifestyle is different. Language is different. So it actually networks with all that. It's a cultural and aesthetic thing. But the principle base remains the same of honoring the Purusha who is in the ground and who is touching Akasha. The whole cosmic Purusha and the Bhumi Purusha.
Okay. Another question is, how was this design, the concepts, how was it applied to construction of towns, planning of towns and cities? We see how this is applied to houses and temples, but was this, or is this being used in a larger sense?
Obviously, it's not used. 150 years, they are out of work. But till that, I mean, Chidambaram is a traditional planned town, planned city. Madurai, Chidambaram, Kumbakonam, these are all cities that have been planned in the traditional format. Kashi, to a certain extent, the older part of it was definitely part of the old. And then the latest experiment is Jaipur. It's very well known. It's based on the Samarangada Sutradhar. Jaipur as a city was laid out by Bhojaraja using the traditional principles of Vastushastra. It's definitely there. It's still in existence in various parts of the country.
Why is Raja Bhoj's book called Samarangan Shastra? I mean, what has war got to do with it?
No, it has many aspects. No, it's not just Vastu. He talks about metallurgy. He talks about play articles, armaments, whole lot of things. The Samarangana Sutradhar is not only Vastushastra. It has multiple layers.
Thank you.
So,
Okay.
Auntie, Pradeep here, Auntie. I just wanted to, hello?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So, when you take a shloka from the Vastu Shastra, say for example, the one that you have from Ganapati Stapati, will there actually be shlokas which will tell us how a carpenter should cut the wood and how he should make a bed or something like that? Will it have that much of detail?
The Manushyalaya Chandrika has a lot of details. It's one of the most recent texts. See, if you look at the texts, unlike authors today who just hijack data and do not acknowledge, the traditional authors always acknowledge the people from the past. So if you pick up Manushyalaya Chandrika, the author acknowledges all the texts that have gone before him, right? And he takes it to another step. Because Kerala, mostly it is wooden structures, there is complete detailing of the joints, dowels, everything. The way in which the roof structure sort of falls into place on the bed plate. It's there. It's all the details are available.
Okay, another question that has come in is, can anyone decipher the deity and why it was housed in the temple based on the outside Vastu? That is a question.
I don't get it. Are you saying, can you recognize what is the deity within?
Yeah.
By walking into the temple? Yes, yes. All the elements of that particular matha will be there. Like if it's a Shakti temple, see, there are Shan Marga in the worship methodology. There are 6 paths that have been talked about. Mainly it is Shaiva and Vaishnava and Shakta. And then there is also Saura, which means Surya worship. Then Kaumara, which is Skanda worship. And Ganapatya, which is Ganapati worship. So each of these paths have its own descriptions. Who are the Vahanas? Who are the attending devatas? What are the natures of the subsidiary shrines that have to be placed there? All that. So the based on the elements that you see on the outside prakaram itself, you can make out. Like the Nandi will be placed in the corners of a Shiva temple. In a Vishnu temple, it will be Garuda. Automatically, you know. Shakti temple, it will probably be similar to a Nandi, maybe a buffalo. It depends upon which Devi it is. So immediately you will know by the symbolism that is already evident in the outer form. All the attending deities will be there.
Okay. Another question is, if someone wants to formally learn this, kindly suggest a pathway. What is available for people who are beginners and wish to learn this? There
are 2 paths, which is what I am already teaching. One is for the general public who just want to become more sort of educated, so that number one is, of course, that they're not taken for a ride by people who are coming and putting fear into them. Because the way Vastu is being addressed today is by making you scared, which is similar to the way the doctors are, it's the reality of the current situation. One is for such people. So I have an introductory course which I teach people just to give them the basic form. But there is another course that I teach for architects and designers, so that they can actually apply it in their work. So that is at the second level. So I would say go through a learning process, because traditionally you didn't learn from reading a book. It's a very new methodology which is incomplete. particularly when you're talking about applied systems, where you have to understand field conditions. You have to go through learning with an elder. It is very important. Find your own local elder if you have elders who are traditional sculptors and craftspeople and so on. Otherwise, come and learn with us. We have many courses.
And you, of course, offer this at Ritambhara, right? So I will put that website here for people to look at. Okay. Another question that has come in is purchasing a second-hand house. How? Yeah. So please tell us about the energies and how to go through a cleansing process.
Yeah. There are two aspects to this also. One is, of course, whether it's important to check out, just like when you get married to somebody, to find out their family, and that's the old way, you see. Find out where they come from, their friends, what is the nature of their social relationships, and so on. Similarly, you have to find out how the people who lived there were. That's very important, because they leave behind, which is let me start from the beginning. The building is created out of what we call Jada Vastu, which means inert substances. These inert substances may have an energy, but it's at a very low frequency. It is not at a high frequency, very low frequency, like stone and wood and so on. They are breathing, they are having their own frequency. They don't hold any anger or violence towards you. They're not doing anything to you to harm you. So the assumption that the house is harming me is totally wrong. What is happening is there is an energy trapped within that space, which is based on the thoughts, the sukha and dukkha of the previous people who lived there. Their energies have got embedded into the built form. And that could actually harm you, because it may not be in the same wavelength as you are. Which is why when you walked into into an old house, you took charge of it by going through certain rituals. Like I told you, yantra, mantra, and tantra is powerful. There is a 100-year-old colonial leftover legacy where we think ritual is bad. So people put it aside and think it is all blind faith. Sorry, you're actually working with energies that you cannot perceive, which are very much there, right? So the only way you can reach out to them is not through your personal capacity, but by calling on energies which are higher than you, who are known as the divinities, right? You call the divinities down, that is known as avahana. You bring them down into a space, into a puja space, and through chanting, you cleanse that space. So there is a Ganapati Homam, Sudarshana Homam, Navagraha Homam, and so on. You create this context where you call the witnesses and tell them, look, we are not asking you to, get lost or whatever. We are saying, can you live in harmony with us? So you invite the energies to live with you in harmony. So the yantra, mantra, tantra is capable of creating an ambience which is suitable for you. So you state, who are you? You talk about your antecedents, your nakshatra, your father, all that. You give the data to these energies and say, this is the person who's going to occupy this space. This man, this woman, these children, this grandmother, this grandfather, and so on. The entire family reality is stated to the witnesses of this function. And all the other well-wishers are brought there. You see, well-wishers are very important for the Indian traditions. We always invited people and whom we fed, you see. You made people happy, and their happiness gives you certain blessings. So this suitable context was created to change the nature of the energies of the old house to suit you, the new occupant. It's a very elaborate thing. In spite of it, if there are problems, then you'll deal with it separately. But this is the base.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Uh-huh. I see. Another question that has come in, Shashikalaji, is how can we install a wooden piece at the beginning, the sthapana, in an apartment or in a place where people are living outside of India, or for people who are buying already built houses?
Wooden piece means? I didn't get it.
Shanku sthapana. Go ahead,
Oh,
Dharmendraji.
Shanku Sthapana is the sundial. This is to find the true north. The problem is today we are using the magnetic compass.
Mm.
Magnetic compass is not part of the Indian tradition. We used only the sundial, which is known as the true north. But today there are apps which will give you the true north. Very good apps actually. You don't have to go through the Shankusthapana, which will tell you exactly in that longitude, latitude,
Mhm.
what is the true north. Because the true north has shifted in the last decade or so. So you have to be very careful. Around the equator, the difference between the magnetic and the true north is not very much, very marginal, which can be ignored.
Mm.
But as you go more to the north or more to the southern hemisphere, there will be huge shifts. But there is a very good app which you can set and find it. I don't see any reason for going through the painful process of Shankusthapana, because that you have to observe for a whole year.
Okay.
Because you have to mark the shadows, you see, sun's shadows, and then find the mean.
Okay. Any particular app? That is another question that you
I
recommend.
don't remember the name, but I have checked a few, but it's available. I'm sure you can do a search, because this app is recommended for people who are mariners.
Mm.
Because in the ocean, it's very important to tap the true north.
Mm.
It's very important for them when they are sailing. So
Mhm.
it is based on some data given by sailors. It's a good app. I've checked it out and recommended it for people. Off my head, I don't remember the name.
Okay. Good. Other questions? I'm trying to scan this, the chat. Anyone else have a question?
Yeah, so I have a question. You have spoken a lot about temple architecture, house architecture, but what about town planning? Because in some sense, all the people in the village or the town are also in a Vastu, right, in a space. So, what does Vastu Shastra tell us about how should a village be planned or a town be planned?
It's a huge subject. I'll just give you a brief reference of it, because it's a massive chapter. That it's called Nagara Nirmanam and Grama Nirmanam. Okay. Basically, the whole concept of, I told you, the Brahmasthana Brahmapadam. Around the Brahmapadam, there is something called the Devika Padam. And then around that is the Manusha Padam, and finally the Paisacha Padam. Usually, for easy reference, it's drawn on a square, but it can be a rectangle. Okay. Or it can even be an octagon. Basically, you're saying there is a central point and spaces that go around it. Okay. In concentric spaces that go around it, and the energy of the center is the highest, and then the energy becomes less and less and less, and very soft for human habitation on the outer periphery. So basically it is, you have to create an outer periphery, only then this happens. A lot of people think it's happening all over the place. No, you have to create a boundary. So if I have a town and the boundary of the town has been defined, I start with creating a temporary boundary for this whole space, maybe 12 or 16 or 18 poles that I stick into the ground. Automatically the energy gets consolidated. Okay, when you create this boundary, just like if there's a paper and you put a point in the center of the paper, there is a relationship between the point and the edge of the paper, right? Similarly, this energy starts consolidating, and then the central portion is left free, and then you zone the whole thing. the whole space, into multiple zones. And then each of the zones will have the same definition of a central point, the Devika Padam, the Manusha Padam, and the Paisacha Padam. And then you say what has to go into what. Supposing there's a natural slope. The slope business that people are pushing today was only done for settlements, not for individual houses. Because obviously, individual houses will have differences in the topography based on where it is located in the settlement, right? So this settlement, how is it moving downwards? Supposing there's a water body. Water body is usually in the lowest most part of the settlement, right? And then how do you create the gradient? Where do you locate the center? And then each of the zones, how do you create a center? So which is why you had the smaller settlements within a larger community or a larger town, which will be identical, replicates the larger form. Again, the nesting concept, you see, the smallest and the largest are in the relationship. They're not different.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see the way in which the entire town or the settlement was planned is not different from the way the individual building was planned. They are actually mirror images or smaller micro units of the larger form.
Mm-hmm.
Auntie,
Okay.
when you talked about stone, when you talked about blacksmiths, carpenters, metal workers, stone workers, and goldsmiths, what about people who actually built the houses with brick and stucco and mortar? The person who created this the mortar or whatever the cement was, who laid the foundation, who designed the building, was that a separate community?
No, they are all part of this. See, the person who made the sculpture is different from the person who built the building. The sculptural person is a person who worked with only the form, Shilpa.
But wouldn't you have had one community to look after the bricks and the stucco and putting the design of the house together like an architect or a contractor today?
Yes. See, the Vishwagnya is the goldsmith. Then the stone, the metal will be used for the built environment. There is the wood craftsman, the Tachan. He's very much part of the ordinary built form. And there is a
like one person who coordinated all this for a builder, say 200 years back.
He's called Stapati. Stapati is the superintending engineer. Today you can call him the superintending engineer or the senior architect. He coordinated the whole group, and they also had the denomination, Vardhaki, Takshaka Vardhaki. So they are people, the ones who can do the jointing, the ones who can do the drawing, the ones who can actually make the built form, the mason, the maestri. They're all part of the community.
Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe one last quick question, and I will shorten something that has come in, is
I have a question.
Overlap between feng shui and Vastu. Just a brief.
There are two schools in feng shui. There is one which is called the compass school and the one which is called the black hat. The compass school uses the magnetic compass, which comes from China. And the compass school is an elaborate school. It has a fairly elaborate system, very much like Vastushastra. The black hat school is, I believe, a much later addition. It seems to have a much simpler system. I don't know enough to be able to give you a critique of either. But from the scholars of feng shui whom I have met, I used to go to conferences in different parts of the world with other colleagues who were feng shui practitioners. And the Chinese feng shui practitioners from Malaysia, they have told me that much of their data comes from Vastu. That Vastu is the original, Vastushastra. And they have adapted it for their conditions. Just like those of you who know martial arts went from India. So they adapted it to their body type and their conditions. So they have adapted a lot of stuff, which is coming back to us as if it's something different and new, unfortunately. But I think I think it is very important for us to go back to our own traditional roots without quickly going away into something which is outside of us, because that may not have very much bearing to our lifestyle, climate, etc., culture.
Yoga is going through some of that and experiencing some of that. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Good. I know we
I have
are.
a last question if you don't mind.
Last question. Yes, please.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So the question is, what are the primary things that needs to be kept in mind when you're planning a house,
Primary things that need to be kept what?
or when you're
You're breaking up.
you're constructing in a house?
Okay, you're breaking up. Will you quickly type it up, please?
What's primary? Yeah, I'm saying, what are the primary elements that keep in mind when you're constructing a house, before you construct a house?
Once again, you have to primarily understand the local conditions. The texts have actually told the Stapati, please go and inhabit that space. Stay there, sleep at night. So you understand how the energies are operating. Look at the water. Make a pit and check the water. Taste the water. Taste the soil. Understand the fertility of that place from the color of the leaves. Feel the winds. Look at the birds that will inhabit that space. So today you can't do all those things. Important for you to understand the nature of that particular property, that plot. Look at the qualities of that environment and build in accordance with that. Don't place a formula-based solution onto this because somebody told you, otherwise you're not going to be happy. Be in consonance with the natural environment. That would be step number 1. Step number 2 would be to locate the center, the Brahmasthana of that property, and see to it. In residential architecture, the texts have specified, and in practice also, that the Brahmasthana of the building and the Brahmasthana and the plot should not coincide. Otherwise, it will create intense internal energies, which cannot be handled by the usual, grahastha. The householder cannot handle it. It can be done only for temples, where the property Brahmasthana and the building Brahmasthana can coincide. So see to it, your building is slightly set away from the central axis. That would be next step. And then, of course, all the location of the facilities and all that. But these two, see to it, it doesn't happen. Okay?
Okay, great answer.
Yeah, so thank you so much.
Yeah, wonderful things that we can apply into
So
our daily life.
Brahmasthana is the
Most critical, absolutely.
Great. So with this, we come to a close. And of course, I want to thank you, Shashikala ji, for an enlightening session. So thank you. We sincerely bow down to you. And again, this is brought to you by the IndicForum, which hopes to be a nonprofit soon, but we want to bring amazing people who are contributing wonderful things towards the Indic civilization. So thank you all for participating, for your time. Thank you, Shashikala ji. Yes, namaskar. Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.